And Pearl told me, this was the age of, I might have been just turning 21 or so. She said, Nicole, when you make $1, save 10 cents. And I said, okay, that sounds easy enough. No problem, right? And then a couple months later, a manager of mine said, Nicole, do you have a retirement account, your 401k? And I was like, no, it's just going to take money out of my account. And he said, well, you know what? Let me take you aside. And he did an Excel spreadsheet and he showed me the power of compound interest. And when he said, look, you just put this little bit of money away and it can grow like this. At back that time, I think he was showing me at a rate of 9%. So very hard to get that on a lot of things now. But when I saw that number, how that little bit can change into such a large number, I immediately called Nadia and said, we got to get into this 401k. So having people around you who were used to managing money for themselves and maybe had a different background than you growing up, being exposed to those type of people early on really had a positive impact in my life.
It's interesting how one piece of information can literally change your life or the course of your life. So you guys, when you worked on Wall Street, you've seen several economic downturns. So Can you talk more about that and how it impacted you guys?
When we first came in was at the height of like just when the .com bubble had bust. So we saw like how it looked a couple of months before and then how it drastically changed, right? Then we went through 9/11. And then when we were still working on Wall Street, I was working at a different firm. We went through the recession of 2007, 2008. The one that made the biggest impact on me was when that .com bubble popped just before 9/11. And it was because people were living well and you see a lot of the amenities that the company had provided. But then when you notice things start changing and they do rounds of layoffs, there were multiple rounds of layoffs, you saw how people were impacted by losing that job and they had no planning. They would walk in, call you into an office, you'll get walked to your desk, security would ask you to grab your stuff and you'll leave. Nobody would see you after that. And that was a big impression on me. I was like, how does this person plan for the next day? Like you were in the office thinking nothing was going to happen. And then all of a sudden things changed in an instant. And I told myself, I can't depend on a job. One, I won't keep much stuff at my desk because you're not going to get me to carry a heavy box out because I'm not going to embarrass myself on the way out. And two, I'm going to make sure that if someone does have to make that decision for me, that decision won't impact my life to the point that I have to run and get another job. I have to take more control over my independence than let that be left up to will of someone else.
There's a lot of uncertainty right now with the economy and what 2023 is going to look like. Actually, what next month is going to look like, really. Can you share maybe some of the lessons or some of the things that you did after witnessing those different downturns that people can apply today so that they can be in a better situation?
I mean, I would say don't wait until it rains, because when it rains, it pours. And I know how people like to say, oh, it's okay for you. If you made a lot of money, you can be all right. But the difference is you have people who can make the same amount of money, but have totally two different financial lives. Making money does not mean that you're good with money. And you can be living paycheck to paycheck, because I think the rate now is probably like over 70% of people, or at least 60% of people live paycheck to paycheck. So that means it spans different income levels. So I'm not a fan of saying it's your paycheck that determines you living a better life. The difference between a person that has the savings and is prepared for a recession is that they understand a rainy day is coming, okay? So they understand that life happens and they put money away as a habit before anything happens. You can't know when your tire is going to blow out, but I guarantee you one day your tire is going to blow out. So you either start planning for that early or you wait until it happens. And if you wait until it happens, you're going to be in a much worse position. So just when it's easier, just keep putting money away. It doesn't matter if it's little or not. Any little bit is going to help. So I would say don't wait for a recession. Don't wait for them to come knocking at your door. Just do it every so often, whenever you can. Make it a priority.
I will say another thing is that just on a personal level, I kept my expenses low. I saw people struggling to pay for private school. How am I going to pay for private school if I get let go? I said, I'm not going to have that fare. I'm going to keep my expenses low. So if anybody's going to be affected, it will just be me. But I know how, if I'm making this amount of money, I know how to live at a lower level. So let's make this happen. I'll put more money away, but I'm not going to increase my expenses at the same time because I want to be extra sure I'll be able to sustain until I can find another job or until I can find something else I want to do. So that was just a personal level. I made that switch in my head, keep everything low as possible.
So you became financially independent in your 30s. How do you define financial independence?
Not having to work for someone else to cover my expenses. That's my definition. So I was able to leave high pressure, long hours job and make more money outside of that job than when I was in that job. So that to me was financial independence, because at that point, I'm not depending on someone else's paycheck to help me survive.
So like Nadia said, I was also keeping my expenses very low. And I was also saving at the same time, investing at the same time, doing other things on the side, like real estate that we both did. But we didn't just buy real estate where we lived in. We bought real estate where someone can live in the same place as us to help pay for that property. So all those things in the combination allow for some income to come in. And as we kept our expenses low, that's where you get financial independence.
How many years did it take you to reach financial independence?
It probably took me, like when I really started putting my mind to it and saving, like at one point I was saving 75% of my check. And then I was putting that in towards investments. I'd say for me to be comfortable with it, 10 years.
Okay.
That's
And
an
so,
honest
you
answer.
know,
It doesn't happen overnight.
No, that's a great reminder, right? But also, as people are watching the show or listening, they're thinking, all right, they worked at Goldman Sachs, so they could afford to save 75% of their income and still live well. What would you say about that?
I mean, Goldman did pay like that depending on where you were, but we were working in Manhattan. We were both living in Queens. I think my rent was very low and I would bring food to work. On top of that, I didn't get my first new car until maybe 8 years ago. I remember buying a car. My first car was what, $1,200?
Yeah, we bought it at an
We
auction.
shared a car. And my car was less than $5,000. And then on top of that, here we go with the Goldman Sachs story. Now, Nadia mentioned 3 different downturns, one being September 11th and the dot-com. Now, when they started doing the layoffs, that same Pearl, that lady Pearl who told me, Nicole, save 10 cents after every dollar, she was asking to be laid off at the same time they were laying off people. And I looked at her versus a person who was laid off and came back in the next day because he could not handle being laid off. And I guess he just didn't know how to tell his family this had happened. Or it was such a
devastation.
It was devastating for him. And they both had worked for the same amount of years, probably 30 years. And the difference between what Pearl was doing and the actions that this other person was doing was a big turning point for me too. When I said, look at this, this person said something so simple. And she was like, that was the one I said, I need to follow her. She just said, save 10 cents for every dollar. And she was like, let me out. I want to get out of here. But the other person was like, what am I going to do? So that's 2 people working the same job because they were literally desks away from each other. And they were having 2 different experiences when it came to recession. So I wouldn't let anybody say it's just because of the amount of money you make. It's how you manage your money, no matter where you are.
I love that. So tell me about life after financial independence. How has it impacted your lifestyle?
I have a lot of freedom now. I choose what to do with my day. And that choice is you have to make the choice to be productive and you have to make the choice to try to make an impact because we're very ambitious people. But when you don't have someone setting a schedule on you, you're going to an office every single day. It's kind of hard to maintain that motivation to do stuff for yourself and keep shooting for goals. So that's something that's different. Like you have a lot of free time on your hands and you have the freedom to choose what you want to do with your life. It's your chance to make that happen. So that's a way that financial independence has changed for me. Also, I get to spend a lot of time with my kids. That was one of the main reasons I decided that I needed to shoot for this goal because my mother was working 7 days a week. And I wanted to be one of those parents who could show up at school, read a book to the kids, bring something for a birthday party or volunteer and go on a field trip. I never had that experience. And I wanted that for my children.
I mean, for me, financial independence, it sounds like it's an end goal, but I think it's a continuous process.